Welcome to Chapter 13 of Traditions and Encounters, the Commonwealth of Byzantium, and a little bit about Russia too. So this chapter really talks about the early Byzantine Empire, which was basically, as you may recall, the eastern half of the Roman Empire. By the 5th century, the eastern half of the empire only remained, while the west crumbled. Of course, that was where the Catholic Church dominated. They crumbled because there were challenges by the Sassanids and Germans, and overall, these lands just got too big, and it was kind of hard to control. And anyways, the Byzantines really had a highly centralized state, and they ran by rules such as Caesaropapism, which is a really important vocabulary word. But basically, it says like the emperor has the Aura of Divinity, so the emperor is chosen to lead this country or this kingdom at the time. This is sort of like the mandate of heaven we see in other places around the world. And also, the Byzantines had a really large and complex bureaucracy, so it was definitely centralized. There's some important people to know. One is Emperor Justinian, and he had this great legacy left on Rome, and he is basically really famous. And also, he had a very famous empress named Theodora, and these two were really popular rulers of Rome back in the day. So what exactly did they do? Justinian, he rebuilt Constantinople, including the Hagia Sophia, which is a really big church. Well, it's a mosque today, but more on that later. It was basically this really grand scale church in modern-day Turkey back in the day. Additionally, he codified Roman law, so this is also known as Justinian's Code. And this was really important because it sort of gave order to the Romans at the time. So that was Justinian and his wife Theodora. Afterwards, we have and see that the Islamic conquistors really start to come over and start to take over the Byzantines. And this occurred because of an emergence of the Islamic State and the Arab people starting to rise up and move out over west. But we'll talk about this more in the chapter about Islam. So one important thing to understand is that Byzantine societies was organized under provinces, most commonly known as themes, and they were ruled by generals. And in these places, there were primarily agricultural economies, so it was definitely based on agriculture, maybe not as much trade. But eventually there were political tensions, and Byzantine sort of started to fall apart as well, in addition to the Islamic invaders. Some words also important to know are the Edict of Milan. This was basically the proclamation of religious tolerance in the Roman Empire when they allowed Christianity and many other religions to be tolerated because it was persecuted before. And also Theodosius I, he was this emperor, and basically what he did was he made Christianity the official state religion, and we'll see why this is important later on. He was also the last emperor of the complete Western and Eastern Roman Empire. So more on Byzantine economy and society. So as we said before, there's a large agricultural base to support cities, and the economy was strongest when large classes of free peasants and themes existed. And the economy weakened when large landholders consolidated and made peasants dependent on them. So it was really bad to take peasants and force them to work for you. In industry and trade, Constantinople was still a big place. It was a major site of crafts and industry, as you see all the goods here. And silk really developed into a major industry when secrets came over from China. Constantinople had a really standard currency called the Byzant. That's also a good vocab word to know. And it soon became the western anchor of trade route. And it really revised the Silk Roads because, of course, as you may remember, the West in Rome had fallen. There were also important banks, and this really helped their commercial enterprises. Urban life, there were some pretty great cities, and there were popular places to hang out, such as the Hippodrome, which is sort of like a modern-day stadium used for mass entertainment, and chariot races were sort of like the football games at the time. And there were two rivalries between the Greens and the Blues team, and this was a pretty big deal back then. Classically, Orthodox Christianity took a role. So, for example, in classical Greece, the official language, once these two empires split, went from Latin to Greek. So, Greece started to play a big role again. The Byzantines really emphasized Greek tradition, and they just tried to sort of bring back the Greek that had sort of been lost when the Romans before them had conquest. So this is a pretty much difference, and you can sort of compare this with the Western Roman Empire, they sort of maintained the old Roman traditions, while Byzantium, the eastern half, really started to gravitate toward old Greece. There was also this Iconoclasm Controversy by Leo III. He was also an empire. Iconoclasm is basically the belief that it's important to destroy icons and other images or monuments. So you also see this like in Islam. But basically, it's not proper. Iconoclasts believe it's not proper to like keep actual pictures of God because they're divine and can't really be represented. So that's a big piece of controversy that we will see later on. Also, at this time, monasticism and popular piety arose. This was basically where hermits and Christian ascetics really started to become like monks and nuns, and they really just started to deviate from the fluff of regular life. And for example, these monks and nuns opposed iconoclasm, so there's another example of that. So there were tensions between Eastern and Western Christianity, or the Roman empires. Basically, you can see the most in the two major cities, so Constantinople of Byzantium and Rome of the Western Roman Empire, and these strains mirrored political tensions as we saw earlier. There were also ritual and doctrinal differences, such as iconoclasm. So like the West really believed in not having iconoclasm, so they have like great sculptures of Mary and Jesus, while the East was really like, no, let's not have this. So like in their churches, it was sort of like Eastern abstract art, not like actual pictures of Jesus. And this eventually led to the schism in 1054, and this was basically when the Roman Catholic Church split into the Eastern Orthodox Church for Byzantium and maintained the Roman Catholics out west. So Byzantium no doubt had a big influence in Eastern Europe. Basically, Western Europe took parts of Byzantium, and it was sort of bad for Byzantium, but they were still able to maintain some of their lands. So with the western part really weak, people such as Normans and Crusaders started carving out states, and they eventually sacked Constantinople in 1204. Crusaders were actually like merchants and mercenaries who actually were from the Western Roman Empire, and they wanted to steal some of the wealth of the East that they really didn't have out west. Also, eventually though, the Muslim Seljuk Turks invaded Anatolia, which is modern-day Turkey, and defeated the Byzantines at Manzikert in 1071. Basically, this was the end of the Eastern Roman Church. And Ottoman Turks eventually captured Constantinople in 1453. Very important date to know there. Don't forget it. 1453. And that really just marked the end of the empire. But no doubt, the Byzantiums still had a strong influence as they sent missions to the Slavs. And Slavs is sort of like modern-day Russia-ish. There were saints such as Cyril and Methodius in the mid-9th century, so like 950 AD-ish. And they really helped spread and keep this Orthodox tradition alive. More on Russia, so like by mid-9th century, the Russians had started to organize a large state. Before, they were sort of just feudal kingdoms that weren't really organized. And they organized into a state, Kiev. And in this state, Kiev, there was this one particular prince, Vladimir, and he converted to Eastern Orthodox Christianity in 989. And basically, Kiev served as a conduit for the spread of Byzantine culture and religion. So even though the Eastern Roman Empire and around Turkey was starting to fall, it sort of shifted north, and it still existed in Russia. And it's here where Byzantium art and architecture dominated Kiev, and icons and onion domes existed as well. And it's pretty crazy because princes established the Caesar Papist control of the Russian Orthodox Church, sort of shifting the Greek Orthodox to Russian Orthodox and basically changing everything. But we still see such a heavy influence with the Greek Orthodox Church. And eventually, we still see today, Moscow was sort of claimed to be like the third Rome because it had such a deep Russian Orthodox Church influence. And here, sort of like St. Basil's Cathedral, it's horribly drawn. I'll put an image of it at the end of this video, but basically it just showed the onion domes. So in conclusion, this has been Chapter 13, the Commonwealth of Byzantium, with a bit of Russia as well. Thanks so much for watching, and hope to see you in the next one.